You are listening to the Agree to Disagree program on thenewamericanmedia.com.
Hey everybody, hello, thank you very much. It is a wonderful Friday afternoon, or evening, depending on what time zone you're in, or if you're part of Brightside Bincheck over in Ireland. We had a message from young Neil. He's with beforeitsnews.com, and we're building this network. We're building this little spider web of people reporting things. Yeah, you know, you just talk, just like you meet people anywhere else, and you just have a chance to sit down and relax. This is Agree to Disagree, and we have a guest that's going to be coming on right now. We are very excited to speak with him, and we kind of take the same approach. We had the same approach when we talked with Governor Buddy Roemer. So basically what we did was we just had a conversation. Not too complicated. Not too complicated indeed. But what it was is we tried not to research everything up front so that we could try to approach this like you might. If you were just learning of this person for the first time, let's go from there. So this first guest we can obviously do that with. This is Christopher David, Ron Paul Republican and Liberty candidate. He's running for office in California. Let's see if we can get him.
Hello?
Christopher David, this is Bruce Engelman with the NewAmericanMedia.com. You are live on the Agree to Disagree show. Are you doing okay, sir?
I'm doing awesome. How are you, Brian?
I'm living the dream. Thank you very much for asking. I was just explaining to our listeners a brief overview of who you are, but I kind of wanted to explain to them and you that we're going to start this kind of from scratch. My buddy Mark Claire with Lions of Liberty said this is a good candidate that believes in some pretty common sense basic concepts. He's running, I believe, against Henry Waxman, and I've got my own story about that gentleman. So I'm just going to open it up and allow you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. How's it going, folks? My name is Christopher David. I am a 25-year-old entrepreneur living in Westwood in Los Angeles. I first got started in politics, I guess you could call it politics, protesting the Iraq War back in January 2003. I kind of initially thought that I was on the left because I hated Bush, and all the people protesting him that I saw were lefty. But foreign policy was really my big issue. And hearing Ron Paul in 2007 go toe-to-toe with Giuliani on stage talking about blowback, that really got me looking into Ron Paul, because I knew that took courage. Within 2 months after that, I was the self-described libertarian spouting Murray Rothbard to anyone who would listen. So it was Ron Paul that really got me involved with the Republican Party, got me interested in the Constitution and really appreciating the Constitution. I am running against a guy who has been in office 12 years longer than I have been alive. And the argument that I make is, listen, it's time for Mr. Waxman to find something else to do, get a real job. But more than that, I want this campaign to be about getting and empowering a new generation of leadership. I think the right people to do that are the youth. It's no surprise, no secret that Ron Paul's campaign has been deliberately targeting the youth. Ron just came to UCLA a couple days ago and set the national record for most students at a single event. We had about 6,600 to the 6,200 up in Chico, and then the day after that it was broken by Berkeley. I think they had about 8,000 people come out to see Ron Paul speak at the campus. So I'm definitely, my only really political experience had been organizing libertarian conservative student groups on college campuses for Young Americans for Liberty, which was the continuation of Students for Ron Paul. I started a business when I was living on the East Coast that eventually took me to LA, fell in love with the area, and just got involved in the very active Los Angeles Liberty scene here. Helped to set up the Los Angeles Liberty headquarters, which has been kind of our Ron Paul grassroots headquarters, and launched a campaign for Congress. I'm the minimum age necessary to run. I am a 25-year-old entrepreneur, and I want to get an entire new generation of leaders into the political process, and excited about this all.
Well, let me just say it was Mark Claire with lionsofliberty.com and lionsofliberty.blogspot.com that referred us over to you. Are you familiar with Mark and their work over at Lions of Liberty?
A little bit. I checked out his website and exchanged a few messages with Mark, but not extremely familiar with what you guys are up to.
Perfect. Well, this is the point of this show because we're connecting the spider web right now. And we just had a caller right before this. We talked for 45 minutes. His name is Hank Xavier of Ron Paul Radio, based in Ohio. 24 hours a day of broadcasting content. They basically create the infrastructure. So if you want to have a Ron Paul Radio show, you get on and you host a show. And so he's connecting this grid across with Lions of Liberty, with the New American Media, and with you now, Christopher David. I want to talk specifically and quickly, mind you, because this is about you, not your opponent. I don't want to get wrapped up in it. But like you said, 12 years longer than you've been alive. 37 years Henry Waxman has been serving in Congress. I met him at a fundraiser. I won't get into the details. But I am really rooting for you. We'll leave it at that. And can you recall where Henry Waxman did something with a speed reader? I don't know if you're familiar with that event a couple of years ago.
No.
Oh, yeah, during the healthcare debate where he was laughing at everyone that said, read the bill, read the bill. Oh, that's ridiculous. So he brought a speed reader into Congress. A speed reader to make a joke of the fact that maybe we should know what's in 2,700 pages before we pass it on an emergency again. So that's how I know Mr. Henry Waxman most. And I guess we're obviously right off the bat very interested to hear how you would differ. Let's see. Regarding California's budget shortfalls, what would you say needs to occur with the budget? Because California is very underwater.
California is very underwater. Specific reforms that I'd like to see in California, I can't actually go into too much detail. The vast majority of my time is spent kind of puzzling over our national federal crises about the tens of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities that we have and our entitlement programs and all this. As far as California specifically, I would start with the fact that California has been ranked by the Tax Foundation at the 48th out of 50th best state for general environment favorable to creating jobs and business friendliness. We're like 49th out of 50 for the amount of business litigation. We have the third highest corporate income tax. One of the highest individual income taxes. There is a reason why businesses are leaving California, and I've spoken with quite a number of business owners here in California. To give you one example, there's a small general aviation company based at the Torrance Airfield in my district, and they're strongly considering leaving the state entirely because these bounty hunter lawyers who are working hand in glove with the state of California are running around suing these small general aviation companies who train people to get their pilot's license. They sell fuel and flight lessons. They're being sued. This one small company is being sued for $185 million. It is one of 70 companies that are in the current round of lawsuits. This is on track to being the largest lawsuit in California's history, and it's all because of this abuse related to Proposition 65, which says that any product containing lead must post a notice to everyone who could potentially come into contact with that. We've all seen the signs posted around buildings, but the people, filing this lawsuit, these bounty hunter attorneys with the California Environmental Health Association, who are working hand in glove with the state, are alleging that, well, because the aviation gasoline, which is, which all aircraft require to run, it meets federal regulations, it meets EPA regulations, but because all of these, business owners have not notified every single resident of California who, potentially could come into contact with this fuel, we're going to sue you for the amount that it would cost to notify every single resident of California, which they're saying is $185 million for this one company. So these lawyers are trying to get them to settle for $15 million. So you have this business that's been around for 25 years, has been perfectly rated with the Better Business Bureau, is facing bankruptcy and leaving the state. So that's just one example of a poisonous business and regulatory climate. So I would say slashing those some of those business and job-killing policies are going to be step one, but that's kind of a more Sacramento thing.
Well, we're just about out of time here because we did have another guest book tonight, so we're going to have a 3-segment rest of the show with him. But we wanted to bring you on, and there's quite a few months between now and the election. So I kind of wanted to introduce ourselves here at the New American Media. We say we seek truth, challenge dogma, and have fun. And I think it's too important of a time in our country right now to be wasting our time on personal issues and arguing about the places we don't agree. Because I think there's a lot of overlap in the angry Tea Party and the angry Occupy, where it's just a little dose of common sense. I think we can get back on the right path, because I think we've been off it for a long time. So we have to run for now, but just give people, this is Los Angeles, you know this, Christopher, so you get a chance to make another elevator pitch to anyone out there listening. Who are you, why are you better than the candidate, and why is it important that they come out and support you?
My name is Christopher David. I'm a 25-year-old entrepreneur. I have no elected official, political experience. That is exactly why people should elect me, because I have no interest, I have no, attachment to the disastrous status quo. I am a coalition builder. I have been to the Tea Parties. I've been to the anti-war protests. I've been to the Occupy events. I do see a lot of overlap between what all these people are talking about. So to use my candidacy not just as a opportunity to push kind of my own libertarian constitutionalist philosophy, but as a vehicle to organize what I think needs to be a transpartisan, massive, grassroots, nationwide coalition is very exciting. We're looking for anyone who wants to join us as volunteers, other candidates, staffers, whatever. Check out our website, ChristopherDavid2012.com. We're about to be launching a youth-specific organizing website at millennialsrising.org. Just look me up on Facebook, Christopher David. Let's be friends and talk more and take our country back.
Excellent. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us today. Mark really wanted to bring you on with all these Ron Paul rallies and get your voice out there. And I'll tell you what, we definitely need to stay in touch, and let's do this again in a couple of weeks, and let's kind of get updates on the progress of your campaign. Let us know how it's going, okay, Christopher?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Brian. Take care.
All right, you too. That was Christopher David running against Henry Waxman, 37-year congressman. Is it time for that guy to figure out something else to do? Yeah. The answer there is maybe. My name's Brian. This is the New American Media. We'll be right back.
You are listening to the Agree to Disagree program on the newamericanmedia.com.
Hi, Brian from the newamericanmedia.com. Last year I had this idea. I wanted to start a website of my own, not just something, a presence on Twitter, a presence on Facebook, and have a thing. I wanted a website. I wanted a home base for all of the ideas and things I'm interested in. I wanted live radio. I wanted to communicate with the globe. I was tired of being spoon-fed dogma by corporate interests and just, here, believe this, believe this. I said, no, I think there's something underneath the surface, but I didn't know how to do it. So I contacted Ted Distel of disteldesign.com. Ted walked us through the process of, okay, you want videos, you want to do quotes of the day, you want to have a spiritual section, you want to have a 1984 watch where government's intruding and private corporations are intruding into your privacy. Yeah, those are the things that I was interested in. Ted walked me through the process. We built thenewamericanmedia.com, and I encourage you to go online and take a look at our site. That's what he's capable of. Please, if you have an idea, go to disteldesign.com. That's D-I-S-T-E-L design.com.
Have you ever considered adopting a pet to be part of your family? Our animal companions can be just as close to us as our human companions. If you're considering adoption, please visit your local shelter and adopt a pet today. Shelter pets make the best pets.
Follow the newamericanmedia.com on Twitter at American_media_.
Hi, it's Brian from the newamericanmedia.com. I'm a sports fan. I was raised in Cleveland, spent 25 years in Ohio. I watched the drive, the fumble, the shot, the shot, too. I watched Art Modell steal the Cleveland Browns and win a Super Bowl over in Baltimore. I watched a horrible coach named Bill Belichick go on to the Patriots and win Super Bowls over there. Hooray. I am a bitter sports fan. Let's not even talk about what happened with he who shall not be named, who went to South Beach to take his talents there. Excuse me, I almost threw up in my mouth a little bit there. I am a sports fan who cares to talk about the things that matter to me. That is the Indians, the Cavs, the Browns, and the Buckeyes. But of course, I pay attention to national sports, and we discuss that on our show as well. That's why we have The Unhappy Hour every single Friday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific. Sit down, have a drink. It's the end of a long work week, and we can all get together and talk about the unhappy times that we've had as sports fans. We've all had them. We've had ups and downs, but as Cleveland fans, we only have downs. Join us.
You are listening to the Agree to Disagree program on thenewamericanmedia.com.
Hey everybody, hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Brian. This is thenewamericanmedia.com, and it's the Agree to Disagree program. What a great show. That was excellent. Now, see, I need to bring in... That's right. You know who we were talking to. I want to let you guys know. We have been talking to... what is it? His name is Reggie Brown, I believe. He is an Obama impersonator, and he's hilarious. We've been talking about him getting on the show, and I think maybe next week we should just go ahead and book that if he's available, because we've been meaning to do that. But I'm not really one to give you give you impressions or impersonations by any means. But this is a really good show. Christopher David, 25-year-old youngster. 25 years old. I wish more people at 25 years old cared about this, cared about the fate of our great nation. He's running against Henry Waxman, 37-year congressman. Give me a break. That's enough, man. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It is time for you to be retired, good sir. And then Hank Xavier of Ron Paul Radio. Fantastic. Just a great program. Right now we are going to go ahead and reach out to author of Eternal Flame. And this is a Kennedy assassination book. And pastor Bruce Engelman, my uncle. This man is my uncle, and we'll talk about this.
Hello?
Bruce, this is Brian on the NewAmericanMedia.com's Agree to Disagree show. You are live, sir. How are you doing today?
Doing just fine, thank you, Brian.
Well, we just explained to the audience here that you are an author of Eternal Flame, a book discussing the John F. Kennedy murder, and that you are also my uncle. I think in order to get it all out there in full disclosure, yes, we are related. Yes, we've known each other for a few decades. Yes, I agree with this guy sometimes, and sometimes I don't. But I want more of us to have these conversations and get into the meat, the nuts and bolts of what's going on in our country. So can you introduce yourself to everybody else? I certainly know you. But kind of talk about Eternal Flame, your Kennedy research, who you met down there, the conclusions you drew, and then kind of what you're up to right now, both with your radio show, with the other books that you're working on, and your ministry.
Well, thank you, Brian. I also want to wish your listeners a very happy Good Friday and happy Easter weekend and happy Resurrection Day. And I also want to point out to your listeners that you are not only my one of two nephews, but you are my godson as well.
Ah.
And, yes. And, that carries a lot of weight in certain circles, especially the Italian Mafia in Brooklyn, if you've ever seen the movie. But
now, are you going to make a mafia connection to the Kennedy thing already? This is great.
Well, sure, I jumped right into it. That's called an automatic immediate segue.
Ayo.
Yes, that's called a pre-segue, Brian. Yes.
Very nice.
By the way, Brian, speaking of the Kennedy assassination, Clint Hill came out in public today for the first time since the assassination, as he is releasing a new book. I'm supposed to meet Clint in Dallas here in a week or two. He was the only Secret Service agent that was able to respond to the assassination, and he jumped up on the Lincoln's trunk and pushed Mrs. Kennedy back in when she went to retrieve part of the president's brain. So Clint was on Fox News this morning in an interview on Fox Live. But yes, I've been researching the Kennedy assassination for many, many years, as you well know, probably about 30 years. And it took me about 10 years to write my book, which was published and released in '93. We're fixing to have that, as we say in Texas, we're fixing to have that republished. And also I've started working on a sequel to Eternal Flame.
Now, let's talk for a second, because you brought up the Secret Serviceman. Clint, I'm sorry, what was that gentleman's name again? Clint
Hill.
Clint Hill. Now, you mentioned Clint Hill. What is it that he had to say about his experience? What happened? Because, for a lot of us, we see the Zapruder film, or we see the Oliver Stone movie, or we see Seinfeld making fun of the Oliver Stone movie, which was hilarious if you haven't seen, reenacting Keith Hernandez spitting on him from a grassy knoll after a Mets game. But, for a lot of us that didn't live through it, we just kind of have certain images, and it's just something in time, something in black and white that happened back then. Personalize it. What did that gentleman have to say today in these interviews?
Well, he said, Brian, that it was the most tragic day of his life. He has never gotten over it and never will get over it. He became very emotional when the Fox News moderator showed him a picture of John at the end of the interview, showed him a picture of the famous photograph of John saluting the coffin as it went by on the bier and with the riderless horse. And by the way, that photographer just passed away about a month ago that snapped that award-winning picture of little John. And Clint became very emotional. He also shared very, very candidly how he became an alcoholic. He got hooked on scotch and cigarettes. He became a recluse for 20 years or so after he finished his detail with the Secret Service, after his retirement. Now, after the assassination, he continued to protect Mrs. Kennedy for a number of years, and then he retired, and then he went into a deep state of depression and took to alcohol and booze, and recently he has snapped out of that, and he still gets very emotional, though, and he said it was a very, very tragic day.
Now, you're living currently in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You're also a pastor. You're not just a researcher and an author. You're and by the way, happy Good Friday and happy Easter to you as well. We have a few different topics we want to cover, and I mean, we talked in advance. Maybe we could do one segment like this, one segment like that, and then a third like this. But we could certainly just blend them together, put them in the blender, see what kind of smoothie we get. Let's talk about the spiritual component of things, because you are a pastor, and I think you even touched on some spiritual issues in your Kennedy assassination book. So kind of introduce that side, that version of Bruce Engelman as well.
Yes, Brian. I am a pastor. I pastor the Baptist Temple Church in Fort Worth, Texas. It was built in 1952, founded in 1952 as a new ministry and outreach from the First Baptist Church of Fort Worth, where the great J. Frank Norris pastored. It was one of his ministerial students, Dr. B.F. Dearmore, who started the church in 52, and we are very involved in the community. We have rescue missions for homeless. I just bought a house, and we call it for runaway teenage.
I missed that part. You said you bought a house called what?
Yes, it's called the Prax House, Prax.
Gotcha.
After the Christian businessman who financed it, and it's a home for unwed teenage mothers and runaway teenage pregnant girls and battered wives and so forth. So we're very involved in the community, and I'm the senior minister of the Baptist Temple Church in Fort Worth. And there is definitely a spiritual component to the Kennedy assassination.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit, because I mean we can get into that in a moment, but let's back up just to kind of the nuts and bolts of this. So we were led to believe, much like the 9/11 Commission report, it's a thick book, so they know what's going on. The story that we got after the Warren Commission was there was a guy that didn't like liberty or freedom or something, and his name was Lee Harvey Oswald, and he's just a nut job, and he shot the president from the top floor in a book depository. Is it repository or depository? Repository, right? With an R?
Depository.
All right, I thought myself out of that one. So he's at a book depository, rather, in the top level, and he shoots him and kills our president. Is that what happened, Bruce?
No, not even close, Brian. The Warren Commission was a whitewash. The government at the time wanted to put it behind us. And as it later was disclosed, there were certain elements in the government, or just operating within the periphery of the government, what we call a shadow government, that were involved in the assassination. And also, thirdly, they were afraid that it might be a Moscow-induced assassination or a Havana-inspired assassination from either Khrushchev or Castro, respectively, and they did not want World War III. So the Warren Commission was comprised of some business leaders and politicians to just quickly sweep this under the rug. Key witnesses were never interviewed. The few that were told to change their testimony. And for instance, Oswald was found with a spy camera on him, and it had a serial number that only CIA and Secret Service agents possessed. It was not a spy camera that one could buy, and the serial number on the camera proved that. And the police officer during the arrest that took that spy camera off of Oswald was told to change his story, that it was just a light meter. He says, listen, I've been involved in law enforcement and intelligence work for many, many years, and I know the difference between a light meter and a camera, and it was a spy camera, which it was. But it was an example of how the government told him, or tried to tell him to change his testimony. He would not, by the way. He never acquiesced. Witnesses on the grassy knoll that saw one, maybe two men shooting from the picket fence to the Kennedy's front, to President Kennedy's front right, were told to change their testimony. Some backpedaled because key eyewitnesses were dying quickly of mysterious causes. And so Oswald was who he basically said he was. He was a patsy on the second floor eating his lunch. He was just a part-time employee. He had been employed there about a month and a half at the Texas School Book Depository in downtown Dallas. And he was eating his lunch on the second floor when the assassination happened. The truth is, his friends and relatives said he admired President Kennedy. He liked the president. At the time, Kennedy was viewed as a leftist. We know now that Kennedy was probably to the right of Ronald Reagan. He was for tax cuts. He was for the space program. He was for a big military. But at the time, he was viewed as a liberal. And so why would a leftist liberal like Oswald, with communist leanings for socialized medicine, why would he shoot a fellow leftist president? But the truth is, he liked Kennedy. Well, he didn't shoot the president. Nobody saw him. One man, Howard Brennan, who was nearsighted, made the identification. Well, people with good eyesight and binoculars that were watching the parade couldn't positively identify Oswald as the shooter out of the sixth floor depository. How could a man that was nearsighted? And they went on his description. Colonel Fletcher Prouty was in New Zealand. He was a high-ranking military officer who worked in intelligence, and he was being reassigned to the North Pole that day. And he walks up to a newsstand in New Zealand about an hour after the assassination, and there's a full biography of Lee Harvey Oswald on the front page of the Christchurch Times or whatever the newspaper was.
All right. Let me pause it right there, because you know what that reminds me of. I think of Fox News an hour after September 11th, having everybody's picture, everybody's name, and the bad guy, boogeyman, cookie monster behind it all, Osama bin Laden, along with stock footage, and that never seemed right to me. If you guys couldn't see this coming, don't tell me you've had all this stuff ready. Don't tell me you got it all together that darn fast to have the cover story, to have the entire game plan all laid out. Bruce, I'm not saying that I know exactly how everything went down, but that aspect of it has never sat right with me, even 10, 11 years later.
Well, you and many other people. I personally do not feel that 9/11 was the same type of conspiracy and cover-up, but most of my friends do, including yourself.
No, I wouldn't say that I do. I would say that I still hear very intelligent people using science and using fact to make a couple of points that have not reconciled themselves with me yet. And I said it before. You know, if I ever catch wind that our government has become the bad guy, you know, and the third topic we were going to talk about today was the 1860s Civil War that we had. Because
which was related to the Lincoln assassination,
which was just like the JFK thing. Another, actually, when you said JFK and the Secret Service guy jumping up on Lincoln, I thought of President Lincoln because I heard assassination. I'm like, no, he's not jumping on that guy. But there are a lot of questions that just have not lined up perfectly enough to where enough people feel like something's wrong.
Brian, your point is well taken. It is that same type of thing that, and this was before the days of modern satellite communication.
Right.
Here is Oswald, who's barely been arrested, and he's supposedly just this clerk in a book warehouse for school students, and yet his full biography is on the front page of the New Zealand papers, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away, when his biography hasn't even been published in the Dallas papers yet. I mean, come on. I mean, and of course that tipped Fletcher Prouty off to the fact that it was a major conspiracy and that Oswald had been selected as the fall guy. Joseph Miltier, who was under surveillance by the Miami Police Department Intelligence Unit, said that he was traveling to Dallas to witness the assassination. This was all on tape. I've heard the tape myself. And he said a patsy has already been chosen for the assassination. There were actually two other patsies chosen, one in Tampa and one in Chicago, and they changed the assassination site. It went from Chicago to Tampa to Miami to Dallas, and pretty much really every city had a patsy. And Oswald was the patsy that had been predetermined by conspiratorial elements of the government and the underworld to take the rap in the fall for the president's assassination.
And so this patsy, this guy Lee Harvey Oswald, who apparently, I think I saw the conspiracy theory episode with Jesse Ventura, who you met down in Dallas-Fort Worth, by the way, and you can address that in a second. But I remember he went down there and he took a crack shot. He went. He was a marksman. He's a Navy SEAL. This guy has been trained. He knows his stuff. He might be a little rusty, but he's good. Give him some time. It's like riding a bike. And he went to the same height, the same dimensions, the same length, and had a moving target. And he especially because the type of gun was so rickety and janky and uncontrollable, he just said there's absolutely no way one guy upstairs could have possibly done this. He's like, I'm professionally trained. I'm really good at this. Talk about that aspect of it, because I bring it all up to say that then the patsy is shot and killed. So talk about Lee Harvey Oswald's ability, his aim, his talent, and then how he's instantly silenced, and whether this is all coincidental or just another red flag that we need to dig deeper.
That's a very good point. Dr. Josiah Thompson was the first man to take a look at this. When he found out that Abraham Zapruder, who had filmed the assassination on his Bell and Hall 35mm camera with his secretary, Ms. Steitzman, that the assassination occurred exactly in 6.7 seconds. We have a man up in the window, according to the FBI, shooting a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, which is an Italian military carbine from World War II, that was so inaccurate in World War II that the Italian troops themselves called it the mercy weapon, because it extended so much mercy to the enemy, whether it be in northern Africa or in Italy during the invasion. The military troops and the soldiers and sailors of Italy didn't like it. Oswald bought a used one for something like $12.99 or $14.99 from a sporting goods store in Chicago, a mail order house. And this particular gun, even though the new one was inaccurate, the gun that Oswald bought was rickety and a little bit rusty, and plus the scope was maladjusted that day. And so the Warren Commission, this commission that was chosen by President Lyndon Johnson to whitewash the assassination and cover up any conspiracy for whatever reason, is trying to tell us that a guy who was a notorious bad shot, even though he was in the Marine Corps and had the rank of a marksman, when he allegedly defected to Russia and joined a rod and gun club, his fellow Ruski hunters, when they go rabbit hunting outside of Minsk, they had a joke. They said, when you take Lee hunting with you, you better take another hunter as a spotter, because he'll shoot you instead of the rabbit.
Wow. And
that was with a 12-gauge shotgun. Oswald couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a 12-gauge shotgun, according to his associates in Russia. And they're going to try to tell us that the guy who's a very poor shot with an inaccurate rifle that was rusty to boot got off 3 shots in 6.7 seconds with a bolt-action rifle shooting through a tree. There was a tree in front or in between the window of the 6th floor and the motorcade that day in November of 1963. And they're going to tell us that he shot at a moving target away through a tree with a rusty rifle that was inaccurate when it was brand new with a bad shot? I don't think so. This is not Annie Oakley or Buffalo Bill. When I was with Jesse Ventura that day, Brian, he told me, as a trained sniper in the Navy SEALs, you were always taught and told to take the high percentage shot, which would have been when the president was coming directly toward the warehouse down Houston Street. The motorcade turned right on Houston and then left on Elm. He said nobody that had any Marine training or Navy SEAL training would have taken a shot when the motorcade is going away. So Oswald's shooting at a target going away, and that's when Josiah Thompson says, wait a minute, there's no way that this guy got off 2 out of 3 perfect shots at a moving target going away with a bolt-action rifle. Now, interestingly enough, the Warren Commission reportedly took 3 of the top riflemen in the U.S. Army, and they could not reproduce this feat at a still target, at a stationary target. I took one of the top riflemen out into the woods with me when I lived in Ohio, when I was writing my book, and I put a stationary target the same distance away. This guy had a very good 30-06 that was new and sighted in, and this guy was a tremendous shot, one of the best shots in the state of Ohio. He could not do it with a bolt-action 30-06 at a stationary target. And CBS News in the late 60s, they got 3 or 4 of the best riflemen in America, and they reproduced the track with the dimensions at a moving target, a little train car, like a little mining car, and they had the guy elevated on a ladder type effect, and only one guy was able to do it. So it is possible, but me winning the Powerball last week was also possible.
Well, that is a good point, and by the way, we're talking with Bruce Engelman. He is author of Eternal Flame, a book on the Kennedy assassination. He is a pastor, a man of God, and he is also my uncle. We had a couple of topics here, and I know that we could easily handle, and we've talked about this before, that you could easily do a 3 or 4 hour radio show and not even really get into the meat of the topic, because there's so many different angles, there's so much information out there. But for today's show, we only have about 45 minutes. We're down to about 22 left, so we're going to bounce to topic number 2 here, because it's kind of related. You said that the Warren report with the Kennedy assassination was a whitewash. That brought up to me, yes. and so, like you said, at the Kennedy assassination, on the other side of the world, right at the same time, they had they printed all of Lee Harvey Oswald's story when nobody heard of this guy before, but then all of a sudden everyone has the story immediately, and it just seems strange to me with 9/11. So let's put both of those things together, the 9/11 attacks and the Kennedy assassination, and say, what in the world are a people of a free republic supposed to do when the government turns on the people? And the other topic we want to talk about today was the Civil War. That's something you've been studying as well. And I, of course, know the Civil War is where we freed the slaves. That's why we fought in 1860 to get rid of slavery, where the abolitionists, the Ben Franklins, finally got rid of those southern states and their slaves. Tell me what I'm understanding correctly and where I might be off track there.
As a northern boy growing up in public schools, you and I were both brainwashed that the Civil War was fought only over slavery. The truth and reality is 3 to 4 out of 5 Confederate soldiers, 3 to 4 out of a possible 5, never owned a slave. The truth is that after the war was over, 83% of the slaves stayed with their owners because they were treated so well. Now, I am not condoning slavery. I have stood for civil rights all my life. I've been in civil rights marches. I go to Ku Klux Klan rallies to rally with civil rights people. I put my life on the line. I have always fought for the rights of African Americans and for American Indian natives and Hispanics, and I continue to do so. But it just makes my blood boil that this country and its young people have been brainwashed in government schools over the years that every Southerner is bad, every Southerner is a redneck, every Southerner is a bigot, and every Northern Yankee is an open-minded, enlightened intellectual who loves all black people. The truth and reality is, if you take the 4 top people of the Civil War period, the 4 heroes on Stone Mountain, let's take them first, Brian. General Robert E. Lee, who was the leading general of the Army of Northern Virginia, who a week before was offered command of the Union Army by President Lincoln. He was such a respected gentleman and a great soldier. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, I think the greatest general in history, Stonewall Jackson. I put him right up there with Patton. Number 3, Jeb Stuart, General Jeb Stuart. And number 4, the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. These 4 men are enshrined on Stone Mountain, which is the southern version of Mount Rushmore. All 4 of those men, Brian, were strongly opposed to slavery. Jefferson Davis said, if they give us time, the institution of slavery will go its way of death by attrition, as it did in England through the Parliament. And, of course, that was a Christian who led that movement. If you ever, great movie, Amazing Grace, tells the story. John Newton's convert, who was a pastor in London, former pirate and slave trader, his convert ran for Parliament and got that pushed through in England. And it was solved politically, which it should have been solved in our country politically. And that's what Jeff Davis said. Jeff Davis' slaves loved him so much when he'd come back from Washington to his plantation, they'd run out to meet the massa and hug his neck and usher him back into the plantation. They said Jefferson Davis treated his slaves better than his own family. But he was opposed to slavery as an institution and wanted it to go by the wayside. And Jeb Stuart was against it, and Robert E. Lee was strongly against it, and Stonewall Jackson's best friend, a cook, was a black man. Now, let's switch the side of the coin, Brian. Mrs. Lincoln's family owned, she came from a wealthy family in Kentucky. Mary Todd Lincoln's family owned slaves before and after the war in Kentucky. They were strongly for slavery. General Sherman from Ohio, Lancaster, Ohio, he was for slavery. General Grant owned slaves, Brian, illegally after the war in New York.
Well, there you
and
go.
Abraham Lincoln himself said this, quote, if I could have a free union with slaves, I want the free union. If I can have a free union without slaves, my main goal is the free union. He was not this great civil rights champion that we've made him out to be, and a martyr for civil rights as historical revisionist. The truth is, he was setting up a colony in Africa to ship the slaves back, a place called Liberia. Even gave them the American flag with 1 star in it. They still have that today. So to say that all Southerners were for slavery and all Northerners were against it, and that's why the war was fought, is so inaccurate, it just makes my blood boil.
Well, and Ben Franklin, one of my favorite people in the course of human history, and by the way, George Washington as well. You and I have our Washington story with our family lineage and some of the stories, and I have some good information there. But especially Franklin, I mean, he was a hardcore abolitionist. Washington obviously had a slave. He had someone that traveled with him, and although it was indentured servitude, it was, I don't know. The main point that I'm trying to get at is just that Ben Franklin, one of the founding fathers of this country, he was one of the biggest abolitionists on the planet at the time, and very few people were more respected at the time than Benjamin Franklin. So to think that the Northern, you know, I've never been able to reconcile this race thing, because I've always felt a little bit of animosity toward me as a white guy, but I never did that stuff. I don't condone that stuff. And you know what you're saying right there, if the Civil War was not about freeing the slaves like I had been taught, what else about race have I been told was wrong, and what was the Civil War really about?
Well, the Civil War was really about 3 things. Number 1, states' rights and decentralization of government, just like we're fighting today. That's what the Tea Party movement is about. That's what the 9/12 movement is about. And that's really people in all 3 parties are fighting for.
Okay, let's make sure we understand that here. For impact, you're saying the Civil War in the 1860s was about states' rights, and what was the second part of that?
States' rights and decentralization of the federal government in Washington.
Which is an extension of the 10th Amendment and states' rights as well. So you're saying the same thing, the massive governmental federal government overreach, like the Supreme Court is deciding on Obamacare. Can somebody force you to buy products? And if so, when does that end? Broccoli, cell phones, all this stuff. You know, I'm open to considering new healthcare policy, but not 2,700 pages we never read. But you're saying the same issue about federal government versus small state government, that was what the Civil War was really about?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was also about agrarian society, agricultural society, versus an urban society that the North was really building, and it was also about a culture, a Southern genteel culture that was very Protestant in nature. Even though the Catholic Church sided with the South, the reality and the truth is that the Civil War produced the Bible Belt, and I don't even like to call it the Civil War. The Civil War was the Revolutionary War, and the Civil War was the Revolutionary War, conversely. In other words, when the Irish Brigade of the Confederacy saw their brothers coming up Mars Hill at Fredericksburg, they said, why are our Irish brothers from Boston attacking us? Don't they realize this is the Second Revolution? The South had been invaded. When Robert E. Lee was offered the command on a Sunday, the week before the war broke out, in Washington, D.C., by the Assistant Secretary of State as an emissary for Lincoln, Mr. Lee responded, "Sir," he said, "tell the President I'm honored at his invitation, but I must respectfully decline. I never thought I'd live to see the day when an American president would use his own army to attack his own country." You know, Brian, when we go to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, we don't even attack civilian targets today. But when the North invaded the South, Sherman's March to the Sea, they burnt down every plantation they could get their hands on. They raped every woman they could get their hand on. It was an atrocity. It was terrible. But going back to your original question, the point is the war was just not fought over slavery. That is so simplistic and so off the mark that it's really an insult to my intelligence. I recently spoke, a few years ago, to the Rotary Club in Warren, Ohio. And Judge Tom Geisegem, a Democrat, was with me this week. He came to Dallas with his son Travis, and he said, "Do you know that was the most popular Rotary Club we have ever had?" And I spoke about two things, the Civil War and the Kennedy assassination. And I speak before a lot of Northern audiences, and I say, you know, the Civil War was not fought over slavery. If it was, why was Robert E. Lee, Jeb Stuart, Stonewall Jackson, and Jeff Davis against slavery? And why was Mrs. Lincoln, Sherman and Grant and the Lincoln family for it? It just doesn't stack up.
Well, let's, and this is great because, like a lot of things we do on this radio program on Agree to Disagree, obviously we agree to disagree, and we get into topics where, it can get touchy, it can get interesting, you can have totally different viewpoints, and that's fine. But I think we always prefer to go with the best we have today and worry about making it perfect tomorrow. The good plan today beats a perfect plan tomorrow because we don't have tomorrow. You and I both know that very well. Nothing is guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. And I think every one of these topics we've addressed so far can at least be its entire hour-long episode, if not a series of radio shows in the time to come. So we're going to bounce to a third topic here, regrettably, because I want to keep pushing on this, but we can come back to it. This is like the little teaser. This is the advertisement. This is the sampler at the grocery store, and I hope you go buy the bag of meatballs or whatever. But, you bring up what happened then, and my question is this. You don't refer to it as a civil war. You refer to it as a revolutionary war. My question is this. If September 11th, if the Kennedy assassination, throw in a third or fourth event completely unrelated to either of those two. I'm not really saying because of either of those two events. But if the American people in the constitutional republic of the United States of America were to determine or discover that the government is currently engaged in a civil war against the people, what in the world happens at that point, Bruce? Because I'm trying to learn from history in the Revolutionary War, in the Civil War, in World War II, in Vietnam, in Iraq and Afghanistan, trying to figure out what history can teach me. And I'm concerned right now for my country, and I don't want us to head down the wrong path. I'm trying to find the right path. So having the expertise and the time spent to study the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and the Kennedy assassination, where are we at today as a country? Where do you fear this could end up, and how do we avoid the worst-case scenario?
Excellent question, Brian. We are already engaged in a civil war. I have never seen this country more divided. You take this incident in Florida, where this young man, and it was a terrible tragedy, terrible tragedy, that a 18 or 19-year-old young man would get gunned down who was unarmed.
I believe that was 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, I believe.
17, yes. Well, the media keeps saying he was 14 or 15. You're right, he was 17. And by the way, the media has absolutely distorted every aspect and every angle of this.
It's really disgusting.
Everybody should join you and I to boycott NBC for making it sound like he was telling the 911 dispatcher that, oh, this is a black guy that I'm gonna hunt down. Actually, the dispatcher was saying, sir, can you tell us, is this man white, Hispanic, or black? And he's looking out the window. It's raining. It's dark. The guy's got a hoodie on. He said, I think he's black. They didn't put in the 911 dispatcher's question. But I say all this to say, when President Obama ran for president 4 years ago, the media and the left wing said, all racism will disappear. This is what we need. There won't be any more division. Well, then why is Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, the two biggest ambulance chasers in the history of this country, taking an incident and trying to make it a racial moment when, in fact, it was a Mexican-American who shot a black fella, and we don't have all the facts yet. And the media is totally distorting it the way they did in your hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, with the Sam Shepard case back in '54 when Sam was accused of murdering his wife. He was declared guilty in the Cleveland Press and Cleveland Leader and Cleveland Plain Dealer before the trial even began, before the preliminary hearing was done. That's what they're doing to this Mexican-American. I'm not siding with either side. I'm saying let's get the facts. The point is we are in a civil war right now, Brian. It's just a Cold War. I mean, for instance, a few years ago, Tom Foley sued his own constituents in the state of Washington. Recently, President Obama and the Justice Department, under Eric Holder, sued the state of Arizona. And so we have a federal government that's attacking the states on every level, but it's a Cold War. It's not a hot war.
And what about his recent comments basically threatening, as some people said, threatening the Supreme Court about, the Supreme Court must therefore obviously consider that a lot of people would be impacted negatively, and it would be unprecedented. Sorry, I don't do a really good Obama, so I'll stop right now. But recently, he really upset some judges because, they ordered Eric Holder to write a response letter, 3 pages, single-spaced, saying, now don't tell me you actually believe the things that you were just saying, and don't let us think that you were actually threatening us like some people have suggested. Here's 3 pages to clarify yourself. I mean, have you ever heard of something like that from a president toward a Supreme Court?
Only twice before. Abraham Lincoln did it at the outset of the War of Northern Aggression. That's actually what I call it. Liberals call it the Civil War. Moderates call it the war between the states. And conservatives and constitutionalists and historical realists, we call it the War of Northern Aggression. And I'm a Yankee. What agenda do I have in this thing?
You're Pennsylvania and Ohio. Yeah.
Yes, I'm from Pennsylvania. I was born in Ohio and reared in Pennsylvania, proud of it, but I'm a Yankee. So what hidden agenda or ulterior motive would I have? I'm like you, Brian. I tell the truth, and I'm glad my nephew has learned that. And your dad and brother are the same way. But to get to your question, Lincoln did it. He suspended habeas corpus and threatened to throw the federal judges in jail if Maryland seceded, which they almost did, to go with the South. And he also threatened the Supreme Court not to get involved. FDR tried to stack the Supreme Court so he could push through his New Deal alphabet soup programs. It was unsuccessful, but he was very antagonistic toward the Supreme Court. Those are the only other 2 times in history. However, and by the way, his successor, Harry Truman, was very respectful to the court, even though he disagreed with him on several issues. But if you put the animosity or attacks or offensiveness of Lincoln and FDR together, it doesn't match the tweaking that President Obama has given the U.S. Supreme Court. Even Bill Plant, the liberal for CBS News, called his press secretary on the carpet about it yesterday. I think the press may be finally starting to wake up a little bit. Brian, let me just say this. I like President Obama personally. I think he's a very nice man. I think he's a good family man. I disagree with his religion, and I do think he's the worst president we've ever had. The man had no experience. He had no business running for president, never been a congressman, never been a governor, never been a mayor, never been in the military, never ran a business, and never been on the city council as an alderman in Chicago. Nothing. The 2 years he was U.S. Senator, he didn't pass one bill. He spent his year and a half running for president, and he was in the weakest state legislature of all 50 states as a part-time state senator in the state of Illinois. He was a community activist, a community organizer, and a law professor. As far as statesmanship and leadership experience as a chief executive, he had zero experience. So I wish the president well. I pray for him every day. I like the guy. I like his family. But he is a socialist. He's a radical leftist. And he is the worst president this country's ever had.
So, in our remaining minute and a half here, Bruce, it feels like we're on the tipping point. A lot of people have said it. I'm not sure exactly where I stand on it, but I'm a prepare for the worst, hope for the best kind of guy. I'm a Boy Scout, be prepared, and something feels wrong. Where do you see in our final minute here, so you're going to have to be brief, what's the worst case scenario? How could we devolve into something that is going to be a very bad thing for our country, and how do we rise above it all and come together and succeed as a nation right now? Because it could go either way, a lot of people are saying.
Yes, that's a very good question as well, Brian. A very astute question. See, to me, questions reflect a lot of forethought. And the worst case scenario would be the president and his administration declaring martial law. I don't see that happening. Along with that, he could refuse to leave office. I predicted, against all my political junkie friends across the country, Democrat and Republican, I predicted 5 years ago that Mitt Romney would get the nomination and beat Obama by a landslide. And a lot of that is hinging on the economy and the prices of gas. If gas goes up to $8 or $9 a gallon, like Obama wants it to, Romney will win by a landslide. But Romney's got to run a little bit of a campaign. He's making some silly statements, and his campaign staff doesn't act like they know what they're doing. I've had people call up to donate money to the Romney campaign, and they can't even get through to his headquarters to donate money. So apparently he doesn't want our money, and he thinks he knows how to run a campaign. I think Mitt is a very astute businessman and a very wise man. He salvaged the Olympics. He's kept his Mormonism out of his governorship of Massachusetts, and I think Mitt's a very qualified man. Is he my first choice? No, not even my second choice, but at least he has a business background, and he has been a governor of a leading state, including a liberal state. So, it's the worst case scenario would be martial law being declared. I don't see that happening. But on a second tier or a second level, if Obama wins re-election, we may as well all pack our bags and go either to Canada or over to England and Europe or Germany, because I'm here to tell you, we know from his hot mic that he is going to push through even farther left-wing agenda items and placate the Russians, Chinese, and Iranians even more. Hey, tell the Prime Minister, tell Mr. Putin that everything's going to be okay if I get reelected. I'm in an election right now, and the president of Russia says, I go back, I tell Vlad, thank you very much. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Well, you know what? We talked about this, and that was pretty much where we would wrap up our show and say sayonara. But, that's the beauty of running your own show. You get to extend it a little bit. This is Easter weekend, of course, and you do govern over a flock down there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So let's take a second. Let's shift gears, because I know we wanted to spend 15 minutes on the state of religion in the public arena of discourse. Is it just Rick Santorum saying, I'm going to ban pornography, and gays shouldn't get married, and abortion. Or at this time at Easter, are we supposed to maybe think a little bit more about the family concept, about the concept of the eternal soul, about what's really important to us? Can you talk to everybody and just kind of give them something to think about for this Easter weekend in the final minute and a half we have left here, Bruce?
Yes, I was in Israel a year ago at this time, and I saw the tomb, and it's still empty. And those of us who are Christian in nature or heritage or conviction, whether we be Catholic or Protestant or Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox or Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox or Nazarene or Methodist or Lutheran or Episcopal or Anglican or Presbyterian or Pentecostal or Church of God, whatever denomination we are, whatever religion we are, we all agree that Jesus Christ went to the cross to pay for our sins as an act of redemption. He spilled his blood willingly and voluntarily. And even the Muslims say he's the second best prophet after Muhammad. But we cannot deny that this man lived. He was the greatest man who ever lived. He is my Savior, and I'd like to encourage your listening audience at this time not to put their hope in Washington, not to put their hope in the United Nations, but to put their hope in the Son of the living God, who is the resurrected King of Kings, and he is coming back again real soon. We also need to say a prayer today for the plane crash in Virginia Beach.
We talked about that today. Horrible.
Yes. On this Holy Weekend, we need to pray for those precious people there. We don't have a report. We have 5 injuries. The pilots ejected out of that F-18 naval plane. But, you know, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the Middle East with the Arab Spring. But we have a hope that is much higher than the United Nations or Washington, regardless of what party's in there, and our hope is in heaven, not on this earth.
Well, that's a good point, Bruce, and I think we're going to leave it at that right there because, you know, we pray for peace. We pray for, I personally pray for the libertarian concepts where we can all agree to disagree. You know, we are our brother's keeper. Do unto the least of us that which you would do unto me. And look, we have to agree to disagree on some stuff, and I think at this time...
Brian?
Yeah.
Jesse Ventura told me that day on the grassy knoll. He said the Republicans need to stay out of the bedroom, and the Democrats need to stay out of the boardroom.
That is one of my favorite
remember,
quotes.
Libertarians, conservatives, and constitutionalists are all distant cousins.
That is fantastic. Well, Bruce Engelman, my uncle, author, pastor, thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to bring you back on the program. We'll do a full hour on each of these topics split up so we don't have to rush it so much next time. Bruce, have a great
tell
happy
your lovely
Friday.
wife, Sarah, I said hello and happy Easter to your listening audience.
Yeah, have a great Good Friday and a happy Easter to you as well, and with all of your crew over there as well. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. We've had another really wonderful show. Another really, really inspiring. Just a great show. I thank all of you guys and girls. I keep saying guys, but I mean guys and girls, of course. I want to thank Christopher David, the 25-year-old congressman who's running to defeat Henry Waxman out here in Westwood, California, the Los Angeles area, the West LA area. Christopher David, good luck, buddy. I have met Henry Waxman, and let me tell you, I am going to follow your campaign, and I'm going to keep bringing you back on this program to speak to people and explain the differences in philosophy. Because California once brought us Ronald Reagan. I don't agree with the man on everything, but I'll tell you what, we could use a lot less government these days and a little bit more personal responsibility, I think. So, Christopher David, thank you for joining us today. We'll bring you back on the program. Hank Xavier, or HX. From Ohio. Thank you very much for joining us. He called in from Ron Paul Radio. Go ahead and look for him. He just signed up. He's following us on Twitter. Just do a search for Ron Paul Radio. And we also want to thank Bruce Engelman, pastor, author, my uncle. Yes, that's full disclosure. He is a gentleman of rare pedigree. I speak politics as often as I can. And I have rarely conversed with somebody who knows more about politics and American history and world religion history. I mean, the guy, he's like one of those, I don't want to say a monk, because he's obviously a pastor, a Christian pastor, but he's a man that has studied a lot of stuff. And he and I, 7 out of 10 times. Yeah, that makes good sense. Hey, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree with you there. And then you go, whoa, I don't see eye to eye with you on that particular issue, good sir. And I think we need a little bit more of that in our country today. We need a little bit more of the understanding that if another man is not breaking my leg or picking my pocket, I got to stay out of their business, man. We just have got to stay out of their personal business. Let's talk about things. Let's be personally conservative and explain what that means. But let's govern libertarian just for a second, because we've got to unite. That is the one thing I need you... Folks. Listener, folks. I need everybody out there. I need everybody to listen to this. We have got to team up. We've got to realize we are Americans in the constitutionally limited republic of the United States of America. This is what we are. This is what we stand for. I don't need to sell you my God, and please don't try to sell me yours. You know, we need to agree to disagree from time to time, and that's why we call this show Agree to Disagree. So I want to thank Bruce for coming on the program. It's very interesting viewpoints. He really brings a unique perspective, a very well-rounded, educated perspective on a lot of this stuff. And I think it's valuable that we can have these open conversations where we can agree to disagree. Every Friday we do these shows here at thenewamericanmedia.com. Click on TNAM Radio. If you're out there on Twitter, we're at American_media_. Follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia. My name is Brian Engelman. Thank you very much for listening this Friday, April 6, 2012. Until next time, take care, everyone. What's going to happen on December 21st of this year, by the way? Guess I'll have to tune in and see. Take care.